Hello, thank you for clicking on this video. I recently took part in an agency mastery program on leadership. My niche being AI, I did a 30-minute presentation all about how leaders can effectively help their teams adopt AI. About an hour before I set off, this was a couple of days ago now, I recorded a run through of the slides with my audio to the camera. I thought instead of keeping the presentation that I worked hard on in a file somewhere where no one can access it, I will upload it on YouTube, and whoever is interested in this topic may develop insights from it. So I hope you enjoy, and leave a like and subscribe if you're new around here. Hello everyone. Now it is time for my section of today's workshop. I've learned a lot so far, and I'm excited to add to these insights which we've been discussing today. My segment is all about leading AI adoption. We've established that leaders need change as agencies grow, but the technology in the world and the world itself is growing just as fast as some of these agencies. We are facing a big task with this new form of technology, AI, and it's our job and the leaders' job within agencies to rise to this challenge. The first point I would like to make is that AI adoption is not inherently a technology problem. This is how it is usually framed, and it's clear to see why, as ultimately AI is a form of technology, and there is thousands of tools and platforms and training required for these tools. However, I believe this framing to be incomplete, as technology and a problem with adopting it, I believe, is caused by the underlying behavioural and environmental patterns you see below this. I feel like these precede the eventual technology problem. This doesn't mean to say that the environments and behaviours within these agencies signal incompetence. I believe that strong teams resist change first. They are often experienced organisations with clear ways of thinking. This resistance, I believe, is explained by a classic law of human nature, rigidity, which is a way of explaining how we humans do not like change. This is especially true if the thing that you are currently doing and the system you have in place is working. There's common phrases such as, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't change the winning formula, for example. We are at the very beginning of AI adoption, and this creates a large amount of uncertainty. I believe that many teams simply don't see where AI can genuinely add value to their current workflow. I believe a sensible starting point is to use AI in boring, repetitive work. I think this is where you can leverage its primary advantage, which is speed. The upside of this is that it leaves the meaningful parts of marketing that we enjoy more for us, and we can use our judgment and expertise without AI interfering. When this entry point is not made explicit, this is where AI adoption can fail quietly. From what I have seen, there is no explicit rejection or cancellation moment when it comes to AI adoption. This is because it is a form of narrow intelligence. It can be used in countless tasks, and it's hard to reject all of these at once. For example, automations exist to connect all of these forms of narrow intelligence together. Each individual AI has to be trained on a certain data set with large amounts of data, may I add. Because there are so many use cases, this creates inconsistency within an agency. It's hard to keep track of all of the use cases people are using AI for. There is also inconsistency with levels of openness and proficiency within your team. And in general, this creates fragmentation, which is the complete enemy of AI adoption. The initial interest in adopting AI is real. Early experimentation happens because there are countless videos and promotions on our social medias on all of the ways that AI can help you. However, teams soon realize that this adoption requires time and energy, as workflows need to be meticulously designed for AI to work properly. This causes a quiet deprioritization, as teams are already busy as it is. I have a jet fuel analogy where we have the people within an agency as the drivers of a certain vehicle, the system is the engine of this vehicle, and then AI is the jet fuel that you put into the vehicle to make it go even quicker. If the system and the people within the agency or workflow are flawed, the engine may not be able to take the jet fuel, the person may not be able to keep up with the speeds that the vehicle is driving. As I've said, designing these workflows which are able to support the jet fuel takes time and energy, and people try and bolt it onto previous workflows, and this fails. People start to question whether it's even worth using AI within their agency. All in all, nothing breaks with AI adoption. It just stops mattering. Work continues as normal, and that agency may be experiencing success, and AI quietly drops out of the workflows. And this is where most agencies stall. Their competitors who use AI and adopt it effectively begin to silently pull away. The last point before I introduce the main framework of my presentation today is that AI introduces exposure. Because of its speed, AI changes visibility. For example, we have exposure of competence of its users. Because the output is so quick, it can expose quality of thinking and their level of judgment. We have exposure of speed. AI removes the drafting and thinking time, and this exposes who can decide quickly and who uses processes within an agency as cover. And we also have exposure of relevance. When AI comes in, people may start to question if they still bring value and wonder what is their job now that AI has taken a large portion of it. All in all, I call this an amplification effect. Great work becomes even better due to AI speed and making that work visible. However, bad work becomes visible just as quick. This can be an advantage, as AI highlighting the previous weaknesses in your workflow can prompt you to change them quickly. I have designed what I call a signals framework. I call these signals because they shape behaviour indirectly through what a leader notices, responds to, and reacts to, not through direct instructions or policies. Teams constantly interpret signs, especially under uncertainty, and when the work can be imperfect, which is common with AI. The three build on each other over time in chronological order. We have the permission to use, the security to learn, and the reinforcement of this desired behaviour. Let's begin. Signal 1, permission. As I said, we are not focusing on direct policies here. So, guidelines, leadership statements, and announcements are not the focus. Here I'm speaking about indirect permission, which leaders send out and signal to their teams. These are often overlooked when there are direct rules in place. So permission is not declared, it's inferred. Teams infer what their leaders' reactions will be to certain behaviours based on behavioural interpretation of past events. Here I have constructed a simple diagram, and we start with someone experimenting with a certain behaviour, let's say AI in this case, of course. The leaders respond in a certain way, and then rules are learned. These consequences, good or bad, teach boundaries. For example, I know an agency where its leader is clearly threatened by AI and dislikes the technology altogether. If this was an SEO agency, they might use AI to write content for their client. If this was an SEO agency, perhaps they will use AI to construct content for their client, making sure AI can include as many keywords as possible. However, this leader may respond, suggesting that AI-generated keywords are quietly deprioritized by the system. This may be correct. However, to the people watching this interaction and the person experimenting directly themselves, this signals that all AI use is currently frowned upon. Here is a biopsychological explanation for this. We all have brain cells called mirror neurons, and these are stimulated when we're performing a certain task and also when we observe others do this task. They allow us to internally simulate someone else's experience, which turns their actions into our own mental blueprint. To exemplify this, it is found that people with very high empathy tend to have more mirror neurons, as they are able to have a better understanding of someone else's internal experience. This can go the other way, as psychopaths are found to have very few of these, which may explain their ruthless behaviour. You are effectively broadcasting the truth of the culture directly into your team's nervous systems. This pattern is also true when a team member is observing another team member, and a leader may react to their AI experimentation in a negative way. The observer's brains feel that same sting of rejection, and it makes them, along with the person who has directly told, both less likely to experiment with AI again. Additionally, humans are hardwired to mimic those in power. For example, children often become very much like their parents. This is because of direct teaching, but also the parents act and set that standard, and the children then naturally adopt these behaviours. This is also true with leaders. They set the standard, so your agency is a reflection of you. To drive AI adoption, you must model genuine curiosity and openness for your agency to use this technology. Teams will prioritise your emotions over written policies. Curiosity disappears when risk feels personal. Curiosity precedes learning and mastery of any task. If you think about all of the intelligent minds in history and ones today, it all starts with a burning curiosity for a certain niche. This is what compels people to actually learn and educate themselves. However, when there is risk involved in this learning, curiosity can soon fade. So AI adoption and the failure to do so is not always a lack of interest, but it can be awareness of certain boundaries that a leader infers to their team that they should not cross with AI experimentation. Signal 2 is security. Hopefully, teams now have the green light and they are permitted to use AI. And there will no doubt be members in your team with different levels of skill with AI and also different learning patterns. Learning AI requires psychological safety. AI adoption starts with not knowing, and not knowing can be risky in many agency environments. Because when there is an element of risk in learning and being a beginner, this can harm people's reputation and perceived competence to the rest of their team. This can push experimentation into low-stakes private AI use, where their competence is not on display to everyone else. So if people don't feel safe being beginners, AI never enters real workflows. Security is dangerous. This statement may seem contradictory, and that's because it is. But let me explain what I mean. Psychological safety means allowing people to try, ask questions, and make mistakes. If someone makes an error with AI, they shouldn't face devastating consequences. And this is essential for embedding AI into real workflows. But safety alone can be misinterpreted. And when all failure is treated the same, standards can quietly drop. So not all failure is equal. We have healthy failure, and this is where most learning occurs, because failing actually spurs people on to change their behaviour and learn lessons from it. And it's healthy failure when the person and one of your team members is showing care and effort in their AI use. For example, they could use it thoroughly, but the outcome is still flawed. If compassion and encouragement is shown to team members here who generally try to make things work with AI, their behaviour will remain the same and they can keep learning AI effectively. However, if leaders frame failure in a way that reckless failure is tolerated, then this can lead to some real problems with client work. For example, if someone produces AI output and publishes it and sends it out to a client before review, this is failure that should not be tolerated. Some failures sit in the grey zone. There is effort present, maybe judgment weak, and someone might favour speed over rigour and use AI to speed up processes where they need to really engage and learn the material, so it's in their own heads when speaking to a client, not just on a screen. So leaders must respond to the process that resulted in failure, not just the outcome. This is subjective and up to you, and what you reinforce as a leader becomes your AI culture. This is an explanation on why AI failure feels riskier than it actually is. The human brain has not evolved in a meaningful way in the last 100,000 years. This means we still carry some unwanted processes which can create fear and anxiety when that fear doesn't exist anymore. So historically, failure in front of peers was dangerous. Being wrong or incompetent publicly could mean exclusion from the group. And in the wilderness, being on your own can often lead to death. So our brains connect the dots of reputation and keeping a stellar reputation in order to avoid death. However, AI failure is not lethal. At least I hope it isn't within your agency. But our brain doesn't know that and still interprets it all the same. Failure on your own can be absolutely fine. Say if I'm rehearsing this presentation, as I am now, and I fail or stutter, I can just go again and no one is watching. However, if I did it in front of you all today, maybe I'd blush and go red, start to get embarrassed, because my reputation is on the line. So reputation protection is often more sought out than learning. But I believe leadership in terms of AI adoption and in general must override this instinct deliberately, encourage learning, and also do not murder your employees for getting things wrong. So, to summarise, learning involves exposure, and this exposure involves risk. Leaders must instill a culture of safety to allow their teams to try and fail in the initial learning period when working with AI. Ultimately, more successful businesses and people have failed more than less successful businesses and people. What if I told you that you were 10 failures away from your next big win? Therefore, in Signal 2, slow adoption with AI is often a form of self-protection. People either stick to familiar ways of working or use AI where it's low stakes or invisible. And this is a form of reputation management. Leaders should ensure their teams that it isn't dangerous to fail as long as there was care and intent behind the failure. Signal 3 is permission. Now there is psychological safety to be a beginner, it is about maintenance. And as with the theme of the rest of this signals framework, I'm not talking about formal reinforcement systems such as KPIs, incentives, or targets. It's everyday reinforcement. My first point for this signal is what gets noticed gets repeated. Attention from leaders ultimately shapes behaviour. This can come in the form of praise, even criticism, questions, corrections, all of the above. Reinforcement of behaviour within teams is largely a factor of leaders' responses. Silence teaches. Silence is not neutral. Now, leaders of agencies undoubtedly have lots of tasks to be getting on with. However, a lack of feedback on certain behaviours is a form of feedback in itself. People interpret that absence from their leader and signal it as a lack of care. So if they're working really hard in that learning phase of learning AI and trying to help the agency adopt it in creative ways, zero recognition and feedback from leaders makes that already tiresome behaviour much less desirable. Behaviour narrows. The way behaviours work and cement themselves in agency environments is that the risky behaviours drop out first. Over time, this leaves only the safest form of AI use in this case, which stay. A theme of this presentation as a whole has been that AI can quite easily be used in low stakes work. A theme of this presentation has been that people naturally gravitate towards using AI in low stakes work, and this is because it's safe. Nothing can go wrong inherently, so leaders and clients cannot discourage this behaviour. There will undoubtedly be errors in someone's AI adoption journey, but I would argue that resulting to low-value AI work is not the correct path to go down. Instead, take these errors and failures as a learning process, like discussed in Signal 2. An example of this is that an agency decides to avoid AI use because it is too compliant. And I mean that in the way that it's programmed to agree with people no matter what. This ultimately generates the top AI companies more revenue, because people are more likely to spend time with something that's constantly on their side. However, this can be a large problem because agency executives can go down on a rabbit hole of work that they think is amazing because AI keeps telling them that their thinking is correct. However, when a leader reviews this work, they're thinking, how on earth did they get so far with this weak judgment? Now, yes, this is a problem, and perhaps in a lot of agency environments, this would just be discarded altogether, this type of AI usage. However, further education on how AI works would be able to fix this problem. You can go into the system instructions on any large language model and program it to be ruthless and always challenge weak thinking, for example. This has worked for me because mine is a bit of an arsehole, but it helps me be the most productive version of myself, which is what I want. Another example of an AI error, which I believe should not be discarded, is using it for thinking. When working through any kind of task with AI, it is easy to let it take over. Therefore, the system knows everything about a certain task, whereas you don't, because you aren't actually engaging with that information and remembering it. In psychology and biology, we have a term called neuroplasticity, which describes the brain changing its structure. This is how learning occurs, developing new neuronal pathways in our brains. However, when we aren't actively engaging with information, neuroplasticity isn't given that environment that it needs to actually change the brain structure, because no thinking is happening. AI is doing all the thinking for us in this case. This can have dire effects, coming to a client with a massive project and you actually don't know much about it yourself. It's all in a system. However, there is another workaround with education. You can learn from that failure. There is a teaching method called Socratic tutoring, developed by the Greek philosopher Socrates, which involves asking his students questions to guide them to the right answer. You can program AI to be a Socratic tutor with a simple prompt, and within that project that you're working on or specific task, it will then ask you loads of questions, which makes sure neuroplasticity is engaged and you are internalising that information. All in all, with reinforcement, learning how to overcome certain challenges with AI behaviours and learning of better ways to use the technology is much better than discarding it altogether. This is the point in the presentation where I would give a brief overview of what I've talked about, and there is a brief leadership exercise where people can grade themselves on each of the 3 signals, and on the day we discuss this amongst ourselves. But this video is long already and doesn't favour the wilting attention spans of everyone today, including myself. So I will not drag it out any further. Thank you very much for watching if you got this far. I will continue to post insights that I come across in my journey with learning AI adoption and helping agencies. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and stay tuned for more videos.